Okay, so that was a hell of a game. Dallas is moving on. OKC loses by 1 point and a heartbreaking last 10 seconds. Where SGA, what was the exact play? Was it the step back three over PJ, or was it the blow by on the Lively switch and then to the Chet lob? But then the foul on the PJ three, where like they were making the announcement at the same time that they were calling up Steve Javy. So I'm like, who the hell? Who am I supposed to listen to right now? And on that back down that Luka had on Dort at the end there, like it felt like that went on forever. And that feeling on that play when they're down one, Luka's bringing it up, no timeout is happening. It's just like, oh my god, here we go. Where do you start with a game like that one? Probably the fact that that game felt like a few different games in one. I mean, the lead that OKC had going into halftime, where they had the lineup of Kaysen and Isaiah Joe with SGA, Chet, and J-Dub to close out the first half. And that shifted the matchups. I've done this every single game this series. It put the bigs of Dallas back on Chet most of the time. And so then they would run screen actions with Chet. And then a lot of the time in this game, Dallas was switching with their bigs early on, and SGA was getting that switch, and then whether he's like going at Lively or Gafford and having success on them, I mean, it felt like it was a bit of that. Or it was like Kaysen having good one-on-one defense on Kyrie, or J-Dub or Lou Dort having some good possessions on Luka, where Luka was, he was holding it in, but he was getting frustrated with like some of the travel calls and push-off calls and stuff on him. And then OKC like throwing some extra bodies in the paint, where Gafford's losing the ball in the roll or something. I mean, Dallas, they had to come back in this game, right? And then we open up the second half, and then OKC has another pretty damn good run where, like, J-Dub is getting the Gafford switch, and then he's beating him off the dribble, and then he's, like, finding Chet for a dunk or for a lob. But the first thing that was happening for Dallas was that Derrick Jones Jr. just kept on making his open threes that OKC was handing him. And for the game, I mean, Dallas, 47% from three on 34 attempts. Then we saw, well, it was kind of a couple things. We did see some great defensive plays by the Mavericks, and then we also saw Luka and Kyrie just have their own sort of moment in that third quarter. And I think defensively where it started with Dallas was that they went back to like, hey, let's have Lively play off a Kaysen, or if we got to like sort of go in and out of a zone, we're going to do that as opposed to just Lively is on Chet all the time, or Gafford, And so like it's him playing off of Kaysen Wallace. You got PJ Washington rotating over to sort of, be kind of around the paint, but also be there to close out in case the pass to Kaysen happens from like SGA or J-Dub or whatever. And then one play where Lively, like he was way off of Wiggins, and then he managed to close out two Wiggins to like contest a floater that doesn't go in. So yeah, good defensive plays. And then as for Kyrie and Luka, I mean, it feels like a blur, but I know that they at least made a couple of tough jump shots in that third quarter. One time where Luka just ran a simple screen action with Chet dropping back on, and he draws a 3-point play with, I think, Dort just all over him. But then, okay, SGA just does his SGA thing. He's going to make tough jumpers. A little stretch where, like, Giddey was in the game, and he would screen for SGA, and then SGA is going into, like, pull-up twos with Gafford waiting for him in the paint. But, SGA was just cooking, like, a lot in this game. Or he was just going at PJ in one-on-ones. So we're still remaining in the game. Chet and J-Dub are scoring the most that they have in this series. With a lot of that being because, the matchups shifted back to how they wanted it. Centers guarding centers a little more. J-Dub being a little more aggressive off the dribble, being able to get by his initial guy, if it is the center on a switch, whatever. Dallas's defense was still good. Like, let's not get it twisted. And then we get to a fourth quarter where we just had a back and forth stretch of Luka step back two over Lou Dort. Kyrie, an insane three where the play is, there's 1 second on the shot clock. He is leaning to his left, and he shoots it over Dort, and he gets like the wildest bounce of all time for it to go in. We have, let's see, they were going with the big lineup. They had Chet and Jay Will out there for a little bit in that fourth. A pretty good defensive play where Jay Will does a good job at contesting Kyrie on a pull-up too. But Derek Lively, he had a lot of rebounds, but one rebound in particular where Chet had good position and Lively, sometimes you just got to find a way. He finds a way to get the putback, and then he made like at least one of the free throws. He might have made both of the free throws. Then you have a couple more plays where Lively is once again just sort of planting himself at the rim, and if that means PJ Washington has got to close out to Isaiah Joe, then so be it. One time Lively planted himself there, and Chet tried to like slip a screen, and it became a turnover. Like Lively, to have a rookie doing all this at the center position, right, it is actually just madness. Hell, he had that 3-point play over Chet where it looked like it was going to be a dunk for a second, but it became a layup with Kyrie beating, it was probably J-Dub guarding him on the baseline. And then what you had was two different PJ Washington threes, and the simplest way to put it is Luka drew help. One time SGA was looking to double, and then Chet was the guy who had to rotate from, I think Lively was in the dunker spot, so we had to make a decent run out there. And then another time where PJ was in the corner, and that one was with big Jalen Williams helping off of him from the corner there. And that's just always the threat of Luka, and we know, I've been saying this, and everybody knows this, like OKC, Yeah, they're just more willing than your average team to bring that extra help on that guy, and we'll say, as long as we can get an okay closeout on this guy, we're willing to, think that we will get the better of that most of the time. And I mean, the margins are just so thin in this stuff. Which is to say that PJ made 2 of those threes. you know what I'm saying. Also, one lively play where he was playing way off of Chet, and then he closed out really good for a 3 that Chet could have made. Also, that one time they doubled SGA, like, before he even crossed half court and J-Dub got a 3, like, when that play happened, I said to myself, oh boy, if Dallas loses this game, that might be the play that I remember the most. That was awesome. I mean, you saw Luka, Kyrie, Derek Lively, I'll keep mentioning him, J-Dub, SGA, Chet, like, all the best guys just doing what they do. But I can't forget Derek Jones with his 3s, and he had like an insane like turnaround 2 off of an offensive rebound, or one of his offensive rebounds became one of the Kyrie 3s. Like, he was huge. And I mean, SGA shot making it's going to get a little forgotten because Dallas won the thing. Like, SGA, I mean, he said, if we're going down, it's not going to be because I'm not making shots. I think his last one was a pretty simple like screen action with, it was either Chet or Big J Will, where Lively ended up either switched onto him or, I mean, it was like a high drop, and he's just making a routine pull-up 2 that we've seen him make a million times. Is there a conversation to be had about OKC? I think the conversation to have, at least for me, is, I know it doesn't feel good right now. It's given where I think the consensus thought they would be this season, like this was still an accomplishment of a season with their, spaced out offense, athletes all over the place. I mean, J-Dub, one of the few dudes in the NBA who has shown he can pretty much do everything at a decent level, pick and roll ball handler, catch and shoot guy, cutter, help defense guy. Chet, already where he's at as a rookie defensive player, and, versatile defensive player at that, make shots, go off the dribble, all of it. It's also fair to say, and this is natural given, especially for those two guys, how early in their careers they still are, like, yeah, they got to get better, because my big takeaway that I will have from the series will still be the way Dallas packed the paint on them and the way that they made OKC's offense look uncomfortable for a decent amount of the series. And some of that's internal improvement, obviously, but some of that's also just looking at the roster, and I do think the type of player that this team could need, I know people want them to get a big. I don't think they're going to go for like some slow-footed big guy who's going to like take away from their, athletes everywhere, spaced out the whole thing. But if they could get like a big forward who can help them out on the boards, give them a little bit more scoring inside, give them a little bit more physicality, and still fit into their, we want to be spaced, we want to be athletic and all that, I think that's fair. And obviously we know they've got the assets to get who they want to get. And you look at this deadline, I mean, their big move was Gordon Hayward, who was a nothing for them. Should also be said, like, Cason Wallace being this good as a rookie is also huge for them as well. You can't forget that one. To go to Dallas a little bit more, I think it's safe to say the PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford trades worked out, huh? But yeah, man, that was good stuff. And, we are going to find out in about 24 hours, give or take, who they're playing in the Western Conference Finals, and it should be a pretty good time.